Hello everyone, yassas, merhaba, and welcome to From Root to Vine. For this episode, we're on location for a 2-day extravaganza at the Cypriot Wine Festival and Business Expo, which took place back in June. The Cypriot Wine Festival is the biggest global Cypriot event outside of Cyprus and has been a staple of the community here in the UK for the past 40 years. Through live music, dance, traditional cuisine and wine, it offers a perfect insight into the wonderful vibrancy and warmth of Cypriot culture. It also serves as a necessary reminder of the importance of coming together to ensure our heritage continues to thrive in the UK. All of the conversations you will hear discuss diaspora Cypriot identity. Whilst I was joined by a diverse group of guests, all with unique stories to tell, one thing remains the same throughout. Being Cypriot is cemented in uniqueness and love, and pride for our roots is at the heart of it all. I couldn't think of a more perfect place for our first live podcast event, and it was a real privilege to be part of it. Hi Tatiana.
Hi Maria, how are you?
Welcome, I'm good thanks. Welcome to From Root to Vine.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Cypriot Wine Festival. It's really great to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here.
Good, I'm glad. We were talking when we were just coming up here, and you were saying how you've had your experience at the wine festival in previous years. It's your first time back in a while?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think it was probably 2009 the last
Wow.
time I attended.
Wow.
And we were actually exhibiting as well at the time.
Perfect. Wow, that's a long time. So good to have you back. I'm really, really excited to speak to you for many different reasons, particularly because this is the first time Root to Vine has featured Armenian Cypriot voices, which I'm so excited about. It's a wonderful, important part of the community that I feel like isn't spoken about enough. So I'm really excited. So, you are a business development manager at the Economist Group. You're responsible for the World Ocean Initiative. You've previously worked at The Guardian and The Spectator, and you're also a trustee of the Armenian Institute, which we'll come on to speak about. And you're also part of Alkionides UK, which is a charity for Cypriots, which again we will come on to. I wondered first if you can tell me a little bit about your roots, a little bit about your background, your Cypriot roots, your Armenian roots, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, of course. So I was born in the UK. My parents met here, got married. We ended up in Cyprus when I was about 3.5 years old, I think, 3 or 4 years old. And I did all my school years in Cyprus. My mum still lives there. And my sister and I live in the UK now.
Wow, okay, nice. So what's your heritage in terms of the Armenian heritage? Is your family like native Armenian Cypriots?
So my father's family are from the genocide. So my grandmother survived the genocide. She was an 8-year-old and ended up in an orphanage in Lebanon.
Wow.
And my grandfather was with the British Army. And, well, first with the French Foreign Legion, but there was a point in those days when they were going off and marrying the young Armenian men with the orphans.
Right.
So my grandmother was a young teenager.
Yeah.
And he met her at the orphanage and he got married. This was very common back then because there were a lot of young girls who'd been left in orphanages. And they got married. He ended up being stationed in Cyprus. Okay. So they'd had their first 2 children in Lebanon, and then they had their 3rd child, my dad, in Cyprus.
Okay, that's super interesting.
And that's where they ended up settling for the rest of their lives.
Right, that's super interesting. Well, I think there's sometimes like a bit of a misconception that Armenians in Cyprus began in like the late 1800s, the early 1900s, obviously with the Armenian Genocide, and that's when a lot of Armenians came. But, you know, from my research and from a lot of research, like there are traces of Armenian Cypriots from as early as like 6th century AD. So there is like an inherent indigenous Armenian population. It's not just begun with like the tragedy of the genocide. What was your kind of understanding of that, and therefore your Armenian Cypriots growing up in terms of the history of, I guess, your heritage?
So what's really interesting is that I went to 2 English private schools, but my high school years we did Cypriot history. Interestingly, we touch upon minorities, but it doesn't go into the depth of the sort of legacy that minorities left. It talks about the history of the Venetians, and it talks about the British and the Ottomans and so on, but it doesn't really explore the identities. So fortunately, I learned this through my father. But even more interesting is that I never felt that the Cypriot Armenians did much to sort of highlight this sort of our legacy within Cyprus as well. So yeah, you're right. It goes back. There's a long history of Armenians in Cyprus. There was a very interesting article that came out about 2 or 3 years ago about sort of some of the older cemeteries, because there's a couple of Armenian cemeteries,
right.
And there's one that you can find gravestones from as early as the 15th century and so on and so forth. So yeah, I'd say that I was fortunate enough to have parents that were as interested in history as I was, and were constantly educating us about our history, globally and also locally.
Yeah, that's super important. I think especially with Cyprus, like there's the misconception that it's literally just Greek, and then sometimes we recognise Turkish Cypriots, but it's literally such a multicultural island full of a lot of different ethnicities. So yeah, I'm hoping that things are moving, education is changing, and more people are realising that. What was it like, therefore, your experience kind of growing up as, some might say like the minority within the minority, so being Armenian and Cypriot? Was it ever difficult for you, or were you very cemented in your roots?
So I had a very unique experience because we had moved from the UK, and when I was growing up, I felt very English.
Right.
So in school, when people would say, "Where are you from?" I'd say, "I'm from England." And, and till today, my friends and I, we laugh about the fact that I used to make this gesture of "I'm from England" as if it was behind me. Anyway, so I was considered a foreigner for a very long time.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I went to university, and I remember I was always very international. Even my Cypriot friends in Cyprus were from South Africa. They were from the UK. They were from all over the US. We were all sort of like these hybrid Cypriots. And when I came to study, some of my Cypriot friends would say to me, "Well, why aren't you hanging out with us?" And I'd say, "Well," I said, "I'm the Xeni." And they were like, "Oh, you're a Cypriot." I was like, "Ah." But it's one of those things that it kind of organically occurs.
Yeah.
But also it's the challenge of, I was very, we didn't speak Greek in the house. My father had forgotten his Greek because he'd lived abroad for so many years. Yeah. And he was very English. I mean, people in Cyprus considered him English. And my mother isn't Cypriot.
Right.
So she herself didn't speak Greek. So it was an interesting experience for us, but I didn't really think much about it. I just found it fun. Because I feel like a lot of people, so I personally I'll be honest with you, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about where others think that I fit. I feel Armenian, I feel Cypriot, and I feel British. And frankly, I couldn't care less what other people think. So that's how I've literally lived my entire life.
Good. I think more people should be like that. As long as you feel secure in your identity, then it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. What do you think some of the biggest misconceptions are about Armenian Cypriots?
Oh, this is funny. It's for some reason Cypriots always make these jokes, and it's a lot of my friends' parents. And I'm going to be polite about them, but they're not the most worldly, and they'll say to me, "Oh, you Armenians, you're stingy.
Wow.
And I remember when I was little, I'd go out with my mother, and somebody would say to her, "You're Armenian, da da da." And my mom's Iranian Armenian.
Okay.
And they're very different Iranian Armenians. And my mother would say, "Armenians aren't stingy. They learnt it from you." So that's literally what my response is. Okay, so when my friends' parents say these things to me, I look at them and I'm like, they must have learnt it from you, because Armenians abroad aren't like this.
Well, I won't comment. Although there is a joke, which I'm sure you've heard in the Cypriot community, that obviously like Greek people from Greece, they like smash plates, and we don't really do that in Cyprus. And we always say that like Cypriots aren't stupid enough to like waste their money smashing plates. Like we do not part with our money that quickly. So maybe we are stingy.
These are sort of wrong stereotypes, in my opinion. Generally speaking, about any community. Armenians have certain characteristics. I mean, when I was writing my thesis, I remember there was this book I found from the early 20th century where this British writer is comparing Armenians and Jews, because throughout history, Armenians and Jews have had very similar sort of histories, merchants and sort of scattered around the world and so on. And it was filled with so many stereotypes, and it is so wrong to perpetuate those stereotypes, because Cypriots aren't stingy. The Cypriots I know are very generous people.
Yeah.
Armenians that I know are very generous, but these are sort of preconceived ideas that we continually perpetuate. The one stereotype which I find hilarious, which I think is true, is the Armenian, which is the Armenian visit, because that is true. Armenians are always last to leave. We're the last to arrive and we're the last to leave.
Not good for time management then. Yeah, no, I think you're totally right about like those really weird misconceptions, and I always think about where do they come from? Like, do the people themselves create them? Do they come from outsiders? But it's interesting to think about that. You are obviously very heavily involved in the Armenian Institute. You're one of the trustees. What is kind of the main aims of the Institute, and why is it an important organisation to have?
So the Armenian Institute was started in 2001, and actually some of the co-founders were Cypriot Armenians. And the reason why they wanted to create this space was to do something that was different from what was already happening in the community. It's apolitical in nature, and it wanted to bring together people and discuss ideas and develop, a community outside of all the sort of political and the sort of factions that take place within the Armenian communities globally. AI's aim is to make Armenian history Armenian history and culture a living experience. Right. So we run conferences, we run music nights, we do film screenings. We just wrapped up our film festival with Trustee on Spaces and Places. It was called Spaces and Places, and it explores Armenian identities in film. And then we also run workshops and discussion series. So I myself have moderated our Diaspora Forum series, where we brought together Armenians, Cypriots and Kurds to talk about the diaspora experience in the UK.
That's amazing. And I've actually been to the Institute. I went only a few weeks ago to do an interview as part of your Diaspora Cypriot project, and the amount of resources in your building, like the books upon books upon books, and it's so amazing that you have that amazing archive of kind of Armenian history. And I think especially given the very deep history of Armenia, especially with the genocide, where so much, as with all genocides, things are lost, it's really lovely that you're preserving it in that way, and you're celebrating it.
Yeah, so we have the largest collection of Armenian books in Europe, one of the. It covers everything from fiction to history to architecture to biographies. And one of the things that AI is very passionate about is, of course, the genocide is very important, but there's a lot of Armenian history that predates that. And one of my irks is, for example, the inability of Armenians globally to talk about their history in a concise way. So, when Nagorno-Karabakh happened, when the war, when Azerbaijan attacked, my biggest frustration was the narrative that land belonged to Azerbaijan, when historically it's always been Armenian people inhabiting that land. And it's just a consequence of war, that it just so happened that Azerbaijan was given that land by Stalin. So it's one of those things that, it's important for history to be maintained and for us to consistently educate others about history.
I totally agree, and I think it's a very similar case with Cyprus, where people think it begins and ends with the invasion and the division of Cyprus and the quote-unquote Cyprus problem, which is only a tiny part of so much history. And I think you're right, it's about having an important worldview of that, but also thinking more holistically about broader histories and broader movements. What's kind of the some of the the future, I guess, of the Institute? What are you hoping to do for the future of Armenians and for the future, particularly for the diaspora?
So I think grow our audience, we're a leading arts and cultural charity in the UK. Make that international. I mean, we're on that trajectory. Be able to have more funds to do far more larger cultural experiences. I mean, just yesterday we were talking about how to really expand the film festival in a way that, it's not only like a couple of hundred people attending them, but you're sort of putting that front and center to a much larger audience. I went to see, and I was having this discussion yesterday, but I went to see the Frida and Diego exhibition.
Okay, yeah.
And Frida Kahlo and Diego, they were the most incredible artists, right? But what is it about the Mexican culture that resonates with people?
Yeah.
And it's capturing that imagination of people and that history and turning it, because there is so much interesting history all over the world. But what is it about certain cultures that grasp the imagination of many and others that don't?
I always think about that as well, and I think about in this, like with Cyprus, it's such a tiny island, but so much comes out of it, and there's so much amazing culture that comes from it. And I'm always so frustrated that it just doesn't get like the recognition it deserves.
Yes.
Especially compared to other like diasporas and ethnic minorities in the UK. You know, we have this BAME umbrella, which is like Black, Asian, and minorities, which is like amazing that there's a lot of culture with all the different under the BAME umbrella. But I'm like, why is Cypriot not like recognised more? And it's the same for Armenia as well. And yeah, I hope that is slowly changing. I think it is. I mean, I see it changing with people, so I hope it does.
Yeah, I mean, Cyprus has an incredible history. Its history of sweet wine. I mean, many people don't really know anything about the history of wine, and they think France and they think Italy.
Yeah,
but actually,
exactly.
wine comes from the origins of wine are from Georgia, from Armenia, Cyprus. But very few people know that, and it's important. Just how, you know, you started off asking me about Cypriot Armenians and many people not knowing it. It is very important for us to educate. You cannot rely on the other to come to you and encourage you to do that. It is your job to educate.
Yeah, totally. Well, that brings me on nicely, because I was going to ask you about what are some of the things we can do to preserve and celebrate particularly Armenian Cypriot heritage.
So I think the Armenian Cypriot community in Cyprus can do a lot to amplify that. And there are many ways of doing it. I remember a couple of years ago, I was introduced to Eve Magis. She'd written this wonderful book called The Spicebox Letters, which I highly recommend. And I remember the book was so good. We did Alkionides did a book presentation in London under the auspices of the Cyprus High Commission. We had so many interesting people come to the event in London, and then I was talking to this lady I know in Cyprus, Cypriot Armenian Ruth Keshishian. She owns Muflon Bookshop, which is one of the most incredible bookshops in Cyprus. And Ruth said, let's do this in Cyprus. So we did, and I used my mum's sort of help to get the catering and the wine for free. Magas gave us free wine.
Nice.
Lovely guy. We had so many people there, and what I loved, there was maybe about 20 Armenians. Everybody else was Cypriot or international.
That's really nice. What, in your experience of spending time in Cyprus, how is the bi-communal mixing of Armenian Cypriots with the rest of the island? Because I've personally never experienced that. I don't think I've ever met any Armenian Cypriots in Cyprus. The only ones I've met have been part of the diaspora. And, you know, we hear that, you know, they are very concentrated in a particular area of the Republic of Cyprus. What is that like now, the relationship between Armenian Cypriots and the rest of the island?
So I think it varies depending on the type of experience. I mean, my Cypriot Armenian friends are very involved in the wider community. But yes, I will say that there are some Cypriot Armenians that are quite internal. But generally speaking, you probably wouldn't know that they're Armenian because Armenians wouldn't necessarily say, I'm Armenian. Yeah. And again, I think that in that there is a challenge. Yeah. But there's a lot of young Greek Cypriots who'll say to me, or they'll hear you speak, they'll say, what language is that? And you're like, wait, what? But their parents will know who Armenians are. Yeah. But the kids may not because they're not so engaged. But there isn't much. And this is where I go back to this thing of, it is up to the Cypriot Armenians to be as involved, because the Cypriot government does provide grants to refurbish Armenian community centers in Cyprus. Okay. It does fund the church. The primary school is state-owned. Right. So it's not as if the Cypriot government isn't doing its part to support the minority, but I do think that there is a lot of work that needs to be done to, in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s, everybody knew Armenians for the arts and culture. Like they were the ones that were delivering excellent programs. And there still are individuals like Garo Kehian, who runs the Pharos Trust, and he runs some of the most spectacular cultural events in Cyprus.
That's really amazing. I like what you said, that a lot of Armenians just describe themselves as Cypriot. I think in a lot of ways that's really nice, because there's so much division, and you know, we labelled as you're Greek or you're Turkish or you're Armenian or you're like Maronite. So it's really nice when people can just say that they're Cypriot. Yeah. And I guess it helps that, I mean, probably looking at all Cypriots, you cannot make any distinction between between who we are until you open your mouths and you talk and you hear the language. So yeah, I think that's really really interesting. What do you think we can do as a community for all Cypriots to foster a strong community between all of the minorities of Cyprus and all of the cultures that make up Cyprus?
I think better education, better culturally run events. You know, I was helping Olivia because I also interviewed for Olivia's
shout out to
project.
Olivia.
She's amazing.
She's so amazing.
Olivia's she's our online digital guru, but she does all sorts, and she's an incredible film producer, director, whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I was talking to her, and I was saying how the one thing that binds humans is art. All forms of art, literature, film, music, and so on. These are the things that connects us all. And I think that we need to make more of a fuss about that. More money needs to go into the arts.
Totally.
More investment is needed in that space, but also from an educational. It all takes place from a grassroots level, right? And there's only so much that the state can do.
Oh, 100%.
But what makes the difference is the people on the ground.
Yeah, I always say that. It's not the people at the top that are going to make the real change. It's always the grassroots, people doing the work on the ground that are going to make real change. So I totally agree. And that's why community is so important in doing that. You mentioned Alkionides, which is a charity. You are part of Alkionides UK. Tell me a little bit about that charity and your involvement.
Yeah, so Alkionides charity was started in 1998 in Cyprus through a friend of my mother's, Marie Parisinu Nicholsby. She set it up to help a young girl at the time who needed surgery, and there was no money for her. So Marie went around and fundraised, and basically this girl, you know, I think it's safe to say she's here today because of that surgery that she was able to have. And then Marie started doing other sort of charitable activities in Cyprus, like she opened up a summer school for kids with special needs and special needs and educational disabilities. She was helping, at some point the organization was helping poor families in Cyprus. There was a warehouse providing food and so on. And then this was in about 2005, 2006, Marie moved to the UK because her children had decided to stay here. And she and her husband moved here, and we started realizing that there was a need for helping patients coming over from Cyprus to the UK for medical treatment. So we started renting a place out to support them, and we started the charity officially in 2008. We registered in 2008. We've helped over 400 patients since then. A lot of them come back for follow-up care. What we do is provide them with free accommodation, but we also support them with translation, transportation services, emotional support. Yeah. Some of our volunteers, they're older and they're retired, so they're able to go and spend a lot of time with the patients. They go to the hospitals. A lot of these patients don't speak English, so it's really important. I have to say, like, it's just, it's an incredible organization made up of these incredible individuals who they spend all their free time, because we don't get paid for this work, and spend all their free time doing that. One of our big ambitions now is we're fundraising to buy a house so that the charity can offer this service in perpetuity. And then we can also expand the work that we do, because we currently have a branch in the Midlands that provides care and support for children with special needs and educational disabilities. But we want to grow that. We've helped women escaping domestic violence from their partners resettle and set up new lives. We've supported people that came from Cyprus homeless. I remember once we got a call from the embassy to say there was a man sleeping in his car with his family, and he had no money. He'd come from Cyprus after the economic crash looking for a better life. We said, okay, so you could stay at the accommodation, but for a short period of time, and we helped him, and now he's, got a comfortable life, and he's able to sort of support his family, and that's community, and that's what's very important about being able to give people an opportunity in life.
Absolutely, that's so amazing, and it's lovely that you're doing that in the UK for Cypriots in Cyprus that are coming over here, because I feel like we don't really think about that enough, about the support that Cypriots might need coming up for specific things, whether it's like medical attention or things like that. So that's really lovely. That's so amazing. It's another way that you're fostering that community. What has been part of
It just, for me, it's a wonderful organization to be part of because it makes me feel like I'm still in Cyprus.
Yeah.
Because even though a lot of the community members are based in the UK, we're all constantly traveling back and forth to Cyprus. We all have common friends in Cyprus. One of my best friends from Cyprus is now on the committee with me. So it just gives me that community feel that I love. And I have to say that for me, when someone asks me, I feel British Armenian, but with a Cypriot attitude, because I have to say my attitude is very Cypriot.
I love that. British Armenian with the Cypriot
My English
attitude.
friend called me that.
Nice.
But my mannerisms and stuff are very Cypriot.
Yeah, I do sense that from you. Very, very Cypriot. Well, thinking about the dichotomy between Armenian and Cypriot being in the UK, I feel like we know a lot about how Cypriot culture presents itself. Obviously, we're at the Cypriot Wine Festival, which is full of things to do with Cypriot culture. Where can we find Armenian culture in the UK? How does it present itself?
So Armenian Institute.
Obviously.
There's in the British Library there are some fantastic books that you can find there. And I think certainly in the British Museum there's some stuff as well. The AGBU, which is a global not-for-profit, they have a branch in the UK. They run sort of events that bring together young individuals, but they also do their own cultural events. There's an Avedissian Center in Ealing. There's a large community in Ealing, in fact. And, of course, the churches, which I think are very much part and parcel. And on the 11th of July is the Armenian Summer Festival.
Oh, nice.
And I'm involved in the Armenian Summer Festival. So I urge everyone to come because that's where you'll sort of get the full-on Armenian experience, the food, the art, the music, the dancing, and so on and so forth. And there's going to be a fun raffle. I've been tasked with collecting all the raffle prizes. So
fun. That's amazing. The Armenian Summer Festival. We'll definitely plug that when we release this. That sounds really fun. Well, I have one question left, and it's a question I ask all of my guests, and that is, what is your favourite thing about your Cypriot roots? But for you, your favourite thing about your Armenian roots, or your favourite thing about the dichotomy of your Armenian Cypriot roots? Or you can give me all three.
I think it's that I can pick and choose what I want to be anytime I want.
How does that translate though? So when you're feeling sad or when you're feeling happy, you're like, I'm this one and then I'm that one.
No, I think it's more about the opportunity to speak all these different languages and communicate with different people on different levels. I'd say that it's a cool thing to be able to do, and also being able to, I think, having access to so many different cultures has allowed me to sort of be really open to all cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you prefer Cypriot food or Armenian food?
Oh, God. All right. Souvlaki all the way.
Good. Correct answer. All right, we can end this episode here. You've given the right answer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. This was so interesting. I feel like I've learned so much about the Armenian diaspora. The work you do is amazing. Everything you're involved with is amazing. And I hope people go forward now and they learn more about the Armenian Cypriot diaspora because you contribute so much.
Well done for amplifying all of this. And it's a pleasure speaking with you, Maria.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much to the Cypriot Wine Festival and Business Expo for the incredible opportunity. I can't wait to be back. I hope you enjoyed this and all of the conversations from the festival with my wonderful guests. I'll tag anything mentioned in this episode on Instagram and Twitter. You can find us on both at Root to Vine Pod. Please don't forget to give us a follow and get involved in the conversation. You can also leave us a rating and review. It really does help us. I've been Maria Christodoulou. This podcast is produced by In-Depth Creative and music is by Dunya. See you on the next episode. Bye.